JD Vance tried to question Denzel Washington's credibility, but what happened next stunned everyone in the room. "Mr. Chairman, I believe Mr. Washington should publicly release his full academic record," JD Vance said, his voice steady, eyes locked on Denzel. "The public deserves to know how well someone did in school when that person helped shape the laws that govern us." The words dropped heavy, like a quiet challenge aimed straight at the heart of the room. No laughter, no sarcasm. This wasn't theater, it was cold, deliberate, and televised. The room fell completely still. A few journalists straightened up in their seats. Microphones were tilted, cameras blinked red. Denzel didn't move. He didn't flinch. He closed the leather folder in front of him with practiced calm, then looked straight at JD. Not with anger, not even irritation, but the steady calm of someone who's seen this game before, someone who knows the difference between being questioned and being provoked. JD kept pressing, slow and smooth. "This isn't personal," he said, "but I came from nothing. I clawed my way out of poverty. If I had to prove I belonged, why shouldn't everyone?" A few quiet nods in the back. Pens scratched paper. The camera shifted focus from JD's tight posture to Denzel's stillness. But Denzel didn't budge. His hands stayed folded. His eyes didn't blink. He didn't raise his voice because he didn't need to. He sat there like a man who knew the moment would come, and that it wouldn't be him who had to speak next. Because sometimes the truth walks in on its own time, loud enough for the whole room to hear. And when it does, it doesn't knock. If you've ever seen someone questioned just because of where they came from, drop a comment below. Tell us where you're watching from, and if you believe that silence isn't weakness, it's just the pause before impact. Hit subscribe, stay with us. These are stories that demand to be told. That meeting wasn't even supposed to be big news. Just another session by the House Committee on Education and the Workforce, focused on fairness in college admissions. Denzel had been invited as a guest, a longtime advocate for underserved students, public school graduate, full-ride scholarship recipient, and a former law student who had risen far beyond the odds. JD Vance, the Ohio senator, was there to argue for a group of lawmakers looking to reshape admissions policy. He'd debated Denzel before. CNN, a panel called "Does Success Come from Effort or Privilege?" Back then JD had said, "I grew up surrounded by addiction. No one in my family went to college. I had to fight for everything." Denzel had just nodded and replied, "I know what that feels like. Where I come from, hardship wasn't an obstacle, it was the landscape. But I never used that to ask for pity. I used it to push forward." From that moment, they stood on opposite ends of a deeper argument. JD wore his struggle as a badge, proof he deserved his success. Denzel refused to wear his past at all, because he didn't need anyone's approval. That day, the tension wasn't in their words, it was in their presence. JD entered confidently, adjusted his tie, gave a practiced smile when he saw Denzel already seated. Denzel didn't look up, but the air shifted. The room was full. Educators, student leaders, parents, reporters. Most had only tuned in because those two names were on the schedule. JD opened with a practiced pitch. "I believe in education, but I don't believe success should be distributed by race or gender." He continued, "Changing admission rules to increase diversity sounds noble, but it lowers the bar for those who've earned their place." Polite silence, a few subtle nods. Denzel waited. Then when it was his turn he spoke slow. "I don't stand for a race. I stand for reality," he said. "And the reality is, people like me, people from places like mine, we've had to outrun doubt just to be seen as equal." He leaned in, voice steady. "If there's unfairness, it's not in the rules, it's in the assumption that we don't belong." Neither said the other's name, but everyone in the room knew exactly who they were speaking to. A conservative man in the front row leaned over and asked in a low voice, "Where'd he go to law school?" A young reporter began typing fast, searching, then stopped, silent. There it was, top of the page, Denzel Washington. Graduate of the University of Texas School of Law, recognized as one of the highest-ranking students of his year. He had also won a National Essay Award for his work on constitutional conflict and civil rights jurisprudence. An old Politico article described him in one line: The man who made the entire Judiciary Committee reopen 3 closed investigations with a 12-minute rebuttal. What most didn't know, JD Vance once requested a leave of absence during his final year of law school. Personal reasons. It was quietly granted a one-time exemption. Nobody questioned it. He was the kid who beat poverty, and people don't usually investigate stories that already sound like victory. Nothing was said aloud, but a quiet tension settled over the room. A silent wondering who's really been held to the flame. Denzel sat center stage, both hands resting gently on the desk. No phone, no laptop, just a black notebook and a blue pen. JD glanced once before the cameras started recording. Denzel didn't react. He simply met JD's eyes with a gaze not heated, but sharp. The kind of stare that doesn't chase you, it waits. From the press section, a political analyst leaned in and whispered, "They're not debating. This ain't a hearing, it's a chess match." And JD just moved a piece he may regret. When JD first questioned Denzel's academic record, the room stirred, but Denzel didn't move, didn't blink. Because when you walk with truth, you don't have to raise your voice. And while politics might twist facts, intellect never lies. JD adjusted the mic. His voice was steady, deliberately slow, like someone stepping into a speech he had memorized in the mirror. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, scanning the room, "I'm not here to attack anyone. I'm here to ask a fair question." He looked straight ahead. Are we trusting our lawmakers, the people shaping the future of American education, because they truly earned their academic success, or just because they have a good story? The sentence fell like a stone in still water. The clicking of keys filled the press row. Some attendees nodded, others frowned. JD didn't let the silence breathe. He lifted a printed sheet, held it up.
"This is an anonymous post from a site called Edilax," he said. "It's a place where former professors and classmates share intel on public figures who went through law school." He paused for effect. This one post, the author claims to have been a former professor, suggests that Mr. Washington may have received certain academic favors during graduation, that the record isn't what it seems.
A murmur rippled from the left side of the room. Denzel didn't react. He tilted his head slightly, eyes fixed on the sheet in JD's hand. A committee member leaned into the mic. "Is that a verified source?" JD answered, "I'm not saying it's confirmed. I'm saying it's worth discussing, especially since today's topic is admissions, merit, and outcomes." All cameras shifted now, full focus on Denzel. Still, he didn't move fast. No emotion, no defense. He calmly turned the page in his notebook and spoke, not loud, but clear enough that every mic caught it. "Senator Vance, please be specific," Denzel said. "What exactly do you want me to prove? A grade, a rank, or my entire life?" The room didn't laugh. No applause. But the words cut through the air like glass. What had started as a respectful inquiry now felt more like a challenge wrapped in decorum. JD didn't flinch. He stepped forward, gripping the edges of the podium. "If my record had ever been questioned," he said, "I would have shared it. All of it. Good, bad, whatever." He continued, voice tightening, "But when someone dodges a simple question, it's usually because they're hiding something." A wave of murmurs and breath flowed across the room. Some began shifting toward JD, nodding, murmuring, "He's got a point." The room was quietly splitting down the middle, left side leaning toward Denzel, right side toward JD. In the back, an experienced journalist scribbled in his notebook, an academic trial disguised as a fairness debate. But Denzel still didn't fight back, because some battles don't start with fire, they end with silence. That unnerves the room. For the first time in the entire hearing, Denzel looked up, directly at JD, not with anger, but with enough presence to silence the next sentence forming in JD's mouth. The room froze in that stare. Then a sound. A chair scraped quietly as someone stood. It was a young student, thin, nervous, wearing a pale yellow guest badge. His voice wasn't loud, but it didn't need to be. It was raw, steady, honest. "Excuse me," he said, "I'm a first-year law student. I didn't plan to speak." He hesitated, then finished. "But if being a good student is what makes someone qualified to write our laws, then how come some of the smartest degrees are behind the cruelest policies?" The room stopped breathing. Heads turned, some toward the student, some toward JD. No one answered. No one could. Because that question wasn't aimed just at JD, it tore a hole through the logic he'd built. JD avoided the student's eyes, looked down, fumbled to recover. I'm simply asking if Mr. Washington is willing to be as transparent as I've always been, he said, but the force was gone. The words sat heavy, lifeless. In the third row, a woman in a beige blazer leaned to her friend and whispered, "That kid just said the one thing no one else had the nerve to." The energy didn't flip all at once, but it shifted, like a tide turning beneath still water. People began wondering if JD's questions weren't about fairness but about control. He had been too perfect, too rehearsed, like someone who didn't want the truth, just a televised win. Meanwhile, Denzel still said nothing. But now his silence wasn't defense, it was dominance. A PBS camera panned to his hand. The blue pen he held wasn't moving, but gripped. An academic watching later wrote, "That was the moment the hearing flipped. When silence didn't mean surrender, it meant power waiting for the right time." And just when the room reached that fragile electric stillness, something happened. A government clerk leaned into the chairwoman's ear. The cameras missed the words, but everyone saw Chairwoman Sharon Jennings go from calm to visibly stunned. She tapped her mic. "We've just been informed," she said, "that an unregistered guest has requested to speak as a witness, with information directly related to Senator Vance's question." She paused, looked at the name. Professor William Hart, former Dean of Law, University of Texas. The entire room inhaled. JD turned his head suddenly, alert. Denzel didn't even glance back. He closed his eyes, not in surprise, but like a man who already knew this moment was coming. JD, sensing the shift, took a deep breath, rushed to his final argument, trying to land a prepared line. "If we want lawmakers who represent the best of our education system," he said, "then at the very least, they should be willing to show it." He looked up squarely at Denzel, but he never got to say another word. Because from the back of the room, a voice rose. Not loud, just loud enough. All heads turned. A tall man with silver hair stepped forward. Slow, deliberate, long coat, stack of documents in his left hand, an old carved wooden cane in his right. At first no one recognized him until the clerk confirmed. Professor William Hart, former Dean of Law, University of Texas. JD froze. His composure cracked for a split second. His eyes darted to committee staff as if asking, "How did this happen?" Denzel didn't look back. He just breathed out, like a man finally letting go of a weight only he knew he'd been carrying. Professor Hart reached the center. He didn't ask for a microphone, he didn't need one. His voice was deep, measured, unshakably clear. "I didn't register to speak," he said, "but I come today because I have taught both individuals involved in this discussion, Senator Vance and Mr. Washington." He paused. The room leaned forward. He opened a folder, pulled out one sheet of paper, old, yellowed, protected in a clear plastic sleeve. "This is not a transcript," he said. "I didn't bring grades." He held it up. "I brought this. A legal essay. Title: Equal Under Law, Unequal in Practice, A Legal Fracture." Beneath the title, winner of Best Legal Essay, 2013, Federal Civil Rights category, author Denzel Washington. The room was hushed, still. Professor Hart looked out over the chamber. "This was written," he continued, "while Denzel's mother was in the hospital, in her final days." "I know this," Professor Hart said, his eyes moving across the room, "because I was the one who approved his request for more time." He paused, then looked directly at the committee. But he turned it down. He turned to the page and quoted Denzel himself. "If I can't write this while I'm in pain, then what's the point of writing law at all?" The room didn't gasp, but from the back row, a soft sob. PBS cameras panned gently to a young woman in the audience, dabbing her eyes with the sleeve of her blazer. JD didn't look up. His hands were clenched tightly on the table, still silent. Professor Hart turned his full body now, facing JD directly. "I taught you too, Senator Vance," he said evenly. "I wrote the letter that let you return to the program after your family relocated." His tone didn't carry resentment, it carried weight. "I don't regret that. But I'm standing here today not to embarrass anyone, but to restore balance to someone who's been quiet long enough." Then, with a tone sharp enough to silence the walls, I taught both of you, but only one of you ever used hardship as a reason to delay. And that person was not Mr. Washington. No one breathed. No one moved. The sentence stood on its own. Not needing drama, defense, or proof. It didn't split the room between left or right, fair or unfair. It split it between those who earned respect and those who demanded it. Professor Hart didn't add another word. He stepped forward and gently placed the essay on the hearing table. He nodded once, not in apology, not in triumph, but in truth, then turned to leave. No claps, no coughs, no shifting chairs. The room wasn't stunned. It was still, like a courtroom, where the verdict was just spoken. JD stayed frozen. His hands clasped so tightly, his knuckles were white. His jaw flexed. Cameras caught his lips tightened, and for the first time that day, his eyes dropped. Denzel didn't move, didn't blink, but as Professor Hart passed behind him, he slowly rose to his feet, not to speak, but to acknowledge. He bowed his head slightly, not in thanks, not in pride, but as a man does when someone tells the truth that he's carried in silence for years, because some truths don't need a mic, they just need someone brave enough to carry them into the light. The atmosphere shifted. It no longer felt like a government hearing. It felt like a reckoning. JD Vance remained seated. His thumb tapped rapidly against the bottom of his chair, the kind of anxious tick people don't even realize they do. Cameras shifted now, not toward Denzel but toward JD. Tiny drops of sweat glistened on his forehead. He didn't wipe them. He didn't move. Then, unexpectedly, Professor Hart turned back, not to retake the podium, but to face the chairwoman once more. "I won't leave without finishing the part the media always skips," he said quietly. People looked up. His eyes didn't meet JD's, but every word landed on him like a gavel. In the spring of 2008, Hart began, JD Vance, then a final-year law student, sent me a long email. He held up a printout. In it, he requested to delay all of his exams. He said he was experiencing mild depression due to pressure from family obligations. He paused. I approved it. I even offered to write him a letter for a full semester off. His voice dropped slightly. Because I believe that sometimes a student doesn't need a grade. They need understanding. JD said nothing. He tilted his head downward, a subtle retreat from visibility. And this, Hart said, turning to a second document, is the request I received from Mr. Washington around the same time. He held up another sheet. His mother was undergoing her third round of chemotherapy. He didn't ask to delay the deadline. He asked to submit the paper on the day of the exam, not before. Hart took a moment. I remember when he handed it in. His eyes were bloodshot, but he never mentioned his mother. Not once. The cameras turned to Denzel. He was still, but this time his eyes met Hart's, not for validation, but to silently say, yes, tell them, let them know. On the committee bench, an older Republican congressman leaned back and murmured, "No one ever told us this." It wasn't loud, but it cracked the silence. A small line, a shift, like a surface finally breaking open to reveal what was always there. Those who had nodded at JD earlier now leaned away. Their silence wasn't agreement anymore. It was re-evaluation. In the audience, a woman quietly wiped her cheeks with a handkerchief. No outburst, no drama, just quiet recognition. She was Marcia Reed, a former classmate of Denzel's from constitutional law. The C-SPAN mic caught her whisper. He used to sit next to me every morning, 6 a.m. sharp, before the library even opened. Marcia wiped her eyes. I always thought he studied that hard out of ambition, she whispered. I never knew his mother was in the hospital. Professor Hart stood still, but something in him softened, as if remembering something too sacred to share out loud. Wisdom, he said quietly, isn't about where you come from. It's about what you bring to others, even when you're hurting. No applause, no reaction, just stillness. The kind that only truth can cause. A Reuters camera slowly panned to JD. For the first time, his composure cracked. Tight jaw, eyes dropped. Not dramatic, but visible. Something had broken. The shift wasn't sudden. It was slow, inevitable, like a room quietly changing temperature. A live tweet read, "We watched someone use suffering as a shield, but today we saw someone turn pain into purpose." A conservative voice asked, If he's that capable, why didn't he speak up sooner? But no one answered, because that question didn't fit the moment anymore. In the back, a young student paused his live stream. He typed, "Wisdom doesn't shout, it just waits for the right voice." The final frame of the footage zoomed in not on Denzel's face, not on JD, but on the essay, the one left on the table. Denzel picked it up, gently placed it in his lap. Still no words, no thanks, no vindication. Because when justice finally breathes, you don't interrupt it, you just let it exist. No one expected a 3-minute 48-second clip to reshape the narrative. But it did. Within hours, the line, "I taught both but only one used hardship as an excuse," was everywhere. 3.2 million views, hundreds of thousands of shares. One law student wrote, "I used to think silence was weakness. Now I see it's a choice made by someone who doesn't need to be loud to be heard." Some news networks tried to twist the moment. Edited versions cut the uncomfortable truths, but the people knew. The full clip lived on, and under every repost, one comment kept reappearing. He didn't speak, but somehow he said everything. A student group posted a photo, not of JD, not of Professor Hart, but of the moment Denzel stood silently. Denzel's hand resting on his closed notebook. No spotlight, no gesture, just a man standing still in a room that had finally fallen quiet. The image spread everywhere. No caption needed, but one headline summed it up best. "Not everyone speaks, but someone always speaks at the right moment." Denzel didn't do interviews, didn't post statements, didn't go on talk shows. He just returned to work. Exactly 1 week later, a reporter caught him exiting a meeting alone. "Do you think you won the last one?" they asked. Denzel paused, turned, and with that familiar calm voice said, "I wasn't there to win. I was there so someone could learn what they needed to." Later that month, a small Midwest paper published a piece by a 16-year-old high school student, signed only as "someone still learning." One line stood out. "I'm not afraid of bad grades. I'm afraid of learning without knowing why I'm learning." No mention of Denzel, but everyone knew where it came from. The moment was no longer about a transcript, or a grade, or a debate. It was about what we measure and why. And when the story was over, when the cameras had shut off, when even the chairs had been pushed in, the essay still sat there, uncreased, unmoved, held carefully between two hands, one from the past, one from the future. If you've ever been judged by numbers instead of truth, or stood silent when you knew the room was wrong, share this, because not everyone speaks, but someone always speaks for those who never got the chance to. And when they do, you'll know, because the whole room goes still.